Welcome to today's discussion, which is brought to you by Course 5 Intelligence in partnerships with Colgate-Palmolive. I'm delighted that you joined us on this session, which will go by the name of Quick But Not Dirty, where we will explore challenges in agile research and ways forward. We have filled it with a few good examples to help drive our discussion today. For my part, my name is Joseph Sursok. I oversee the EMEA region for Course 5 Intelligence. And at Course 5, we specialize in partnering with large enterprises, where we help them solve analytics and insights challenges. With us, deep technologies, over the last few years, it has enabled us to create disruptive AI-based solutions and platforms for our clients. Now, other than the fact that I'm based in London, another couple of things about me are best described as a couple of bad habits. One is I love reading autobiographies, just real experiences, whether in football, in business, in politics, just human journeys. I really enjoy that. And then the other one is to ask questions, ask lots of questions. I'm very curious and I love asking questions. So more on that as we progress today. Assuming you've joined to explore and learn about doing Agile at scale and at pace, then you definitely joined the right place. I'm delighted today to be joined by exciting speakers with strong managerial experiences and fantastic hands-on knowledge. Christian, let me first come to you, yourself, and your responsibilities at Colgate-Palmolive.
Yeah, thanks, Joseph, for having us or me. So let's start with the facts, and I'm definitely not talking about my bad habits because otherwise we will run out of time for that webcast. So I'm Christian Niederauer. Since 2019, I've been responsible for insights and consumer affairs at Colgate-Palmolive in Europe. And after kind of 6 months at the office, after joining the new job, thanks to COVID, I've spent most of my time now working from home. Although we haven't really planned for it when we moved into the new home back from the UK. So the key challenge I have is that my family kind of banned me to the bedroom at a very small table while they are occupying the more appropriate workspaces. But I've been used to it now after kind of 12 months working from home.
Excellent. Thank you, Christian. And over to you, Silky. Again, a couple of interesting things about you for our special audience, and again, your responsibilities at Course 5.
Sure, thanks, Joseph. Hi, everyone. This is Silky. I have around 17 years of experience in the field of market research, and a large portion of that, around 14 years, I have spent with Course 5 Intelligence. I have briefly worked with the Kantar groups of company. It's called IMRB in India. Now, in my current role, I handle a couple of accounts, primarily Colgate, Microsoft, and T-Mobile, and I lead the insights and analytics function in the company. If you talk about me, one thing which I'm deeply passionate about my work is connecting disparate sources of information and bringing together a 360-degree story to generate insights. Other than that, on the personal front, I'm a nature lover, and during the lockdown, what I'm doing very profoundly is planting indoor plants to just give a better look and feel to where you are. And of late, I even started painting my room walls with some trees and leaves just to give it a little interesting feel. And my daughters are also joining force with me. I'm really excited for this webinar. We have been partners to Colgate for the last 6 years. And have been deeply involved in their agile journey. It is an honor to kind of share the stage with Christian, and we are very excited for this session and look forward to all of your participations. Thank you.
Thank you, Silky. And thank you both for joining us. This will be made available, as with all other webinars, on our website. And to all the folks participating, we will send you a copy of it within 7 days of today. And the website is course5i.com. The other item is Twitter. Please join the fun on Twitter. We'll be tracking the conversations and all the contributions accordingly. The hashtag to note is #AcingAgileResearch. Please feel free to post comments and thoughts on today's topic on Twitter as well. And then lastly, as mentioned in all the lead-ups prior to today, we've allowed 10-15 minutes at the end for some good questions and answers all together. So let's get cracking here. Often when I speak with senior executives, we debate how to adapt to accelerating change in our respective markets, whether caused by competitors, by customers, or through innovation. What always comes back is we need more agility. That's the rhetoric that I hear from senior executives in just about any industry. As many of you know on this call, working in this space with your interest in insights and related departments, agility has been a big topic, specifically in insights teams in the last few years. When we break down the main challenges, as presented here by the GRIT report, we can see what bubbles up to the top. The need for faster is pretty clear. Should you and your teams not be looking at this more closely already, then perhaps you should, and you should do so soon. What we know today is that the answers to address this are not the obvious ones. So the ways to tackle this, the ways to improve this are not the obvious expected ones. We also know that it is no longer a luxury. We've been through a pandemic. We've seen some accelerated change and adoption of market changes. And so to be highly agile is really no longer a choice. While I do not wish to steal any of our speakers' thunder, I will draw your attention to the vision by Forbes, where they talk about less friction and higher performance through incremental value. So it all sounds straightforward, but as we'll find out today, it is not that straightforward. Marketing teams, on the other hand, go hand in hand with all of this. At Course 5, we work just as often with marketing teams and with insights teams. So we've got experience working with both sets of people and some of the challenges they have. And as the data here shows, and as we have seen in CPG, in FMCG, technology, and other industries, the need for transformation has been adopted more readily by marketing and their way of working. There's a lot of data for this. There's a lot of support for this. And as the famous saying goes, it's about striving for continuous improvement as opposed to striving for perfection. And that's what we've seen with a lot of marketing organizations progressing through the last 5 years, I would say. However, attaining a high agile state in market research and insights today, it's still elusive for a large number of organizations. And one clue for you would be that if it was more about automation, if the answer was all about automation, we would not be sitting here looking at these figures today. I know of some surveys recently by Deloitte and McKinsey that demonstrate that the penetration of highly agile practices in insights teams is less than 20%, which is quite low. As I'm sure most of you here today will agree from your personal experiences operating in this field, transformation in insight teams has been underway for a good 5-7 years. Christian will tell us a little more about that. And I'm sure if you were to speak to some of the Course 5 delegates, they will also have some stories about that. Well, some of the penetration is around agile ways of working or a combination of agile tools and methodologies. There is still plenty to do. And in many organizations, it's still very much work in progress. So it is with that idea, if I may, that I will come to you first, Christian, and ask you to share your perspectives and possibly a peek into your own experiences. How realistic is this vision that Forbes presents us, which is this high performance, less friction, and incremental value additions? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's definitely what we're all striving for. And it's interesting that we saw in your kind of introduction that everyone knows that agility is if not the key success factor for organizations in today's environment. But still, it's interesting to understand what's holding us back as an insights function in particular. Because when we think about, I mean, of course, you also showed it in the previous slide that we had people and time related things are usually coming up top of mind, but there are also a couple of other barriers, I would say, to overcome in order to be truly agile. And therefore, I think these are the ones you have to tackle first to really live up to that vision, to really be truly agile. And I know, Silky, if you can move to the next slide. So when we look about the challenges one by one, I mean, the first one is really like with every kind of change. So agility involves kind of a different mindset. And it moves people out of the comfort zone because any change means you have to adapt to new behavior. And to be fair, our functions, so meaning insights and analytics, have not always been the best in managing change. So that too often we find excuses like, okay, there's no database, it's difficult to compare with previous KPIs, etc. And also it means that you have to very often move away from existing partners and approaches that you have been using for quite a while, and you don't really know what's working out. So your head is also at the table, on the table, when you lean forward agility. Nevertheless, it's still worth proceeding with it. And that brings me also to my second point. I mean, once you understood, okay, there is a need for change, you want to embrace agility, then you can have two ways. You can either start with kind of innovating along with existing partners, or you try to move to new platforms. And very often what businesses do, they pick one new partner, so one new platform to help them on their agility journey, to reduce complexity. And while that's not really a bad strategy, and it's also what we have done at Colgate-Palmolive, pretty similar, it also puts you into certain risks in terms of bandwidth issues, that if you have only one platform, maybe at some point you run out of overall sample quality if it's not refreshed and so on. Therefore, there are a couple of things, but I think Silke will touch on that in a minute. So another thing is that if you want to be truly agile, you also have to let go. You need to be able to let go. What I mean here is gone are basically the days of getting a brief from marketing, from R&D, whoever your main stakeholder is, and then you have a couple of days or sometimes even a week to come up with a big research plot. It's also no longer necessary, because you don't have to prepare for every kind of question that might come in the future. In the past was always like, okay, there was that one big piece of research, a U&A, segmentation, and that lived then for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So in 2 years' time, you had a different marketing director, different president, and so on. They had a different question. So you had to prepare for it. That's why we had really long questionnaires and all these type of things. But that's also not what we need anymore. So what we really want to do now is get constant feedback about questions when they arise, and then get fresh data instead of any kind of final big validation or big study. So and last but not least, I mean, the key barrier, and that's what we mentioned before, is for sure related to our lean insights organizations that we very often have, because that limits the use of DIY tools. The name says it already. DIY means you have to do the work. And if you have small teams, it's very difficult to, on the one side, deliver on driving action, connecting dots, diving into the existing data lakes, and on the other side, managing 10 agile studies in parallel that before were managed by agencies that you paid for. So let's have a look at how we did it at Colgate, at least since I joined, to overcome those barriers. So the first thing is, what I also mentioned before, is testing in the past meant a lot of preparation from all teams. In today's Agile setup, you don't really need to do that. I also don't refer to testing anymore. So I very often call it sense checking or people feedback and so on. So while the traditional approach that we see here was very sequential, so you got a brief, designed a study, then waited a long time for the final stimulus to be ready before then moving finally into testing. And you had 3-4 weeks of field time, a couple of weeks or days for analysis, and then you had a yes/no decision as an action standard. And if you were lucky, you had a yes, and then everything was good. If the big outcome at the end was negative, you often had to start from scratch because you didn't know exactly where the mistake was in the overall journey. So when Agile therefore came up, it basically introduced a whole new process overall, how to innovate and how to work. So the key thing was, it's first, people thought, okay, Agile just means we're doing the same stuff that we did before, that you saw on the previous slide, just a bit faster. But that's not really what Agile means to me and also at Colgate. So what we do is basically, we put things in front of people to get their reaction as soon as possible, and in particular when we can still action learnings. So it doesn't really help if they're very late in the process, you understand, okay, your packaging is not working, because then very often that's already locked because it has to be registered, it's presented to customers. So you have to For Agile, it means you have to use that iterative learning process to really, whenever you now start working on claims, okay, check the claims now. If you're working on packaging, check the packaging and then tick boxes. And the good thing is you basically, it also forces you to work as a cross-functional team and optimize things together with the people who are supposed to buy and use the product later on. So at the end of the process, very often you don't need that final validation anymore, because now you know already that you created something that is going to work. So being agile often means a lot of additional work for all stakeholders, because like I said before, DIY tools, you have to do a lot of things on your own, you have to interact much more. So while working on that mindset change, the key thing that we learned is that you have to build scalable resources in parallel already. So something like really building the back end, what we know from IT and so on is super important, that you're not running into a bottleneck at some point. So, and what I want to show you now is basically how we approached it with Course 5 together 18 months ago when I joined Colgate. Basically, the first thing that you do is you start with a virtual team. So we approached Course 5, we said, okay, what are the people that we want to have on our team? And while the chart here talks about FTEs, that's actual people. So we really looked at resumes, we looked at competencies that can also help us in our day-to-day business. So one of these FTEs at that time was also Silky, who is co-presenting with me today. What we also did is we nominated an internal champion, because just now telling everyone, okay, here's now a new resource, you can work with them, sort it out, is not helping. So what we did is basically we defined one person in my team who really acted as a facilitator for both sides. And once this basic infrastructure was in place, we just started basically walking or running. So we started with a couple of pilots with different suppliers, existing ones, new ones, just to understand how the new setup can work most efficiently. And the key learning there was also really start small. So maybe focus on a smaller category, on a smaller market that has not the highest visibility in the company, because you're still here to learn. But once you're confident and you have a couple of success stories, then start expanding. So what we did is we used my bi-weekly team meetings to really showcase, okay, this was something that we've achieved together. And maybe that's also interesting for another category, for other country, and so on. And what we also use that forum for is really gather feedback. So like with Agile innovation, we also kind of we also used this approach to help us to get better together and also improve the process. Because then the next stage was then basically and that's where we are more or less now since beginning of the year. So after 1.5 years or 1 year of partnership, now we're also involving the other stakeholders, so R&D teams, brand teams, sometimes sales teams, and so on. And now we are really at a stage where we are confident enough that also our partners or our virtual team at Course 5 can really work on projects on their own, very often standardized projects, so reoccurring things, but that's really working very well. And what that enabled in return is that my team, those internal market research or insights team, can really focus now on other strategic tasks and helping the business also to action all the new insights that we get now. So, but I think, I mean, I really talked a lot about the partnership, and I think it's also now time to get Silky's point of view, who was basically the key partner on the other side and helping us to achieve what we wanted to achieve.
Thanks, Christian. So, as Christian was saying, we have been involved in the Agile journey with Colgate for quite a while. So, this gave us also a very good perspective when we were, for I remember for one of the regions when we were even involved at a stage of evaluating which supplier to go on with, right? So in the following slides we are kind of going to touch upon those things, like what are the other best practices which will help you overcome the other challenges which Christian spoke in the previous slide. So picking the right set of suppliers. Now, if we think of agility, everyone thinks of, okay, what is cheap, or which supplier can give me results faster. Now, if you think only on those angles, it's not going to work. Of course, they are important parameters, but let's if we look at the left hand side of the chart, what are the type of suppliers which are actually growing in terms of revenue. You see that it's mainly data and analytics providers or technology providers. At the same time, if we see like companies, in what proportion are they using qual and quant, both. It's a very small chunk of company who are actually making use of both the type of methodologies. And still people believe that if you don't have a face-to-face interaction, qual becomes difficult. But the pandemic actually forced the many innovative players and technology players to come in, and there is successfully Colgate is able to partner with suppliers, who is able to do focus group discussions and many, and give rich qualitative insights along with the quantitative insights, right? So especially when looking at quant suppliers, these are some very important points which we learned from our experience and I'm going to share with them, right? So panel strength, I mean, obviously that's the biggest factor. What's the strength of the panel? It should be large enough. You should look at the mix of the panel. Like every company or every brand will have their specific audience type and their specific niche audience kind of thing. So are they covered, and if they are covered, to what extent are they covered, so that later on you're not facing the issue of not getting enough people in that particular audience. What is the recency of the panel? If it is too old a panel, I mean, it has been there with the company for about 10-11 years, one thing which you might receive is response fatigue, the delay in the getting the response. So it should not be too new or too old in my mind. And even if you are an insight person of a particular geo, having to know if a panel has a geo coverage and across geos, what gives you the added strength is you can collaborate with the other geo insights team of other geos, and you can collaboratively set up some best practices for that supplier. You can have a greater negotiation skills, and because they will also get a larger chunk of business, and it kind of empowers you to kind of do things in your company's way of doing. So for Colgate, it's Colgate style of working. So if a supplier is kind of selected, is used across regions, that's an added advantage which we get. Then quality, always ask this question while doing the scrutiny, that okay, what are your ways of getting the quality respondents? Now sometimes we saw that a supplier was too quick, like in almost 1.5 days we could achieve the sample which we were looking for in a study, but then almost 20% of the response took like just few seconds, which definitely means that the person has just responded for the sake of responding. So the limited time of response, straight liners, the quality of verbatims, which you generally check in any traditional study as a part of quality. Ask the supplier, like, what are your measures of ensuring that we get quality respondents, right? User friendly menu, I mean, just speed is not should not be the deciding factor. Is it easy for you to it's an easy DIY tool for you to hover over the menu and really get the results which you intend to? That's very important. And then this is very important, like what are the ways they insight they report their insights, and what methodologies, what flexibility do they have? So are they giving you the option of max diff, sequential monadic, or are they only just sticking to one particular way of doing things, right? So that's why it's a very important to have a good mix of people, panels, sorry, not panels, I mean good mix of suppliers, both qual and quant, varied types of suppliers. And generally, when you're, it's not very easy to kind of judge, okay, how nimble they are, how flexible, or how good you have to go with your gut feeling. But all I want to iterate is, don't settle with just one supplier. Keep on evaluating more and more suppliers, and think before you do a very heavy investment for say 3-4 years with one particular player, because there might be better players coming your way, there might be better techniques and methods coming your way. So have a good mix, and with the support of the V team and that internal champ which Christian was saying, that is possible, because they will dedicatedly use that time to do that in and out, and the other research manager or the business stakeholders need not get into this grueling task of, okay, should I work with this, or will this work, and so on, right? So another important thing to notice is focus. Now I don't think this is a new to the insights function. Lot of research managers time actually goes in the program managing the task, even in this agile world. When you saw Joseph talking so much about the how marketing teams are evolving, how insights teams are also evolving, or forced to evolve to meet that agile culture. The reality of the fact, this is according to the grit report, is, almost 50% and more than 50% of the research managers time is still going in designing the research, managing the research, and simple analysis like charting and simple analysis of the research. So what you would kind of expect, the consulting bit of it, what is this 13% from your research managers, that is still very limited. And why it is so? Because just because a tool is DIY, or it's an agile player, does not mean that the research managers have to spend less time. In fact, as Christian said, it is more labor intensive compared to traditional research, because there is a huge pressure of that constant communication, and because of the iterative outcome, the involvement is far more. So what are certain things you need to do in terms of focus and standardization? One, don't try to make all studies agile, so please be focused on what you want to achieve. So it should be ideally in the early part of the innovation, like concept test, back test, and so on. And sometimes you can also do your custom surveys, but be focused on what are the main business problem you want to solve through agility. That's very important. Then, don't over engineer research, as that was one of the challenge. If you remember what Christian spoke, don't try and get the perfect answer every time you do an agile study, right? So limit the amount of custom questions that can be asked through agile. So for any standard test type, whether it is idea screening, pack test, screen set, have a standard set of questions, and get a buy-in even from the stakeholders on that set of questions. Now, in any questionnaire, something which is very important, especially for products and brand, is the attribute list, or the brand associations, right? So and that, of course, you cannot have a standard across brand. By brands it will differ, but you will still have certain standard company-wide attributes. So have an attribute library. So have this standardization toolkit, which will really help you speeden up the questionnaire designing and other executional part of the tests. Then even when the way you're reporting the results, let the research managers or even this V team not rethink every time they are doing the results. If it is standard test type, set a nicely visualized, good looking, important KPIs being charted out there. Have a standard reporting template, and let the team focus on, okay, what is the key result, what is the outcome, rather than thinking how to chart this or how to make it more consumable, right? So standard questions, standard reporting template, limited customization, and focused study types is very important. Okay, now.
Silky, before moving on, I've got a question that's popped up here regarding DIY tools, if you don't mind. Christian, do you want to pick that up? I think you can see the question. I'll read it out anyway. Now, how keen are business teams to use DIY tools? So Silky and both of you talked about Agile as a mindset and tools, but how keen are people to do it? And are you seeing it shift in their behavior?
I mean, as usual, like I said earlier, any change, first of all, means rejection. Because also, I mean, any team that you talk to in a company with leaner and leaner organizations will always tell you, I have already enough on my plate, so I don't need anything in addition. So therefore, the first reaction was always like, okay, but before I just asked you the question, and then the insights team answered it. Now I have to do a couple of things. On the other side, I think the more then we educated them, first of all, showed them, okay, it's super fast. B, you have course 5 as a support system there as well. And C, it gives you your answers much faster, because before you always was, you had the discussion, and then even if you were fast, it took 2-3 days to get an answer. Now, as they know how to use the systems, and also as we have the support system with Course 5, very often, if a marketeer sits in a meeting, has a question, or is that better or that better? Have we ever explored this? Then they can basically log into the system that we have, ask that question, and get the answer while they are in the meeting. So therefore, that gives them at least an incentive to do that stuff on their own, because it's similar to me, like asking Google more or less, but just with live feedback from respondents. So asking the question, not everyone is super keen of adding more work to their schedule, but on the other side, they very often see the benefit of being closer to people, and therefore also getting answers faster.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, Silky, over to standard toolkits.
Sure. And I will touch upon that topic in the following slides as well, actually, in this slide. So let me move on. Okay. So once you have selected the right set of suppliers and you have a good mix, you even did the best practices of standardizing the toolkits and all those standard things. Is that enough? I would say no, because as Christian mentioned, it involves a continuous experimentation and it's a continuous learning process. Agile means never settle. There is no big outcome. You have to, even in your ways of working, you have to constantly go for that cumulative outcomes, right? So what you need to do in the short run, like always rethink where are the steps you can create more efficiencies, right? So where is the scope? Even if you're working with a supplier who is giving you a result in 3 days, 3 business days or 4 business days, at the reporting stage or at the analysis stage, what are the elements you can automate, right? So keep thinking on those smaller elements of creating efficiencies. So there are hundreds of even open source tools out there. You need not actually know how to do machine learning on your own, or do the automation on your. You can partner with companies. You can select the right methodology and actually bring in those automations and efficiencies in the short run. So always think of which part of the research cycle can I bring in this efficiency. In the long run, as Joseph was mentioning through the question, empower the stakeholders, by doing the research on their own. Now, this may not be possible by directly, routing them to the suppliers as it is. Like some of the suppliers or their platforms may be very easy to kind of hover and all that. But one issue which you might have is those suppliers are not just for Colgate or just for a company, right? So they work for their set of standards, the best practices which they follow is for many companies. So can you build your own kind of DIY platform by combining various a platform which will bring all the various important suppliers to one place, and then really put in that easy menu driven options for anyone who does not understand a lot of research. Also, like the business stakeholder do not come from the research background, so they will be lost if you kind of pose the question like, okay, now select whether you will go with monadic or sequential monadic, or when you're seeing the percentage, will you go with the respondent base or the total base and all that. They are not interested in that. They are interested in which is the final concept which is doing well, or idea which is doing well, and how can I very clearly take that decision, right? So to reach to that stage, if they have to on their own build a small questionnaire, pick the audience, and if you have inbuilt in the background through the menu, through that programming, that will make your life even much more simpler. Because for simple decisions like picking the very early idea or a concept, they can execute their own studies, and then that will give more time back to the insights team to really do that foresight and that consulting role which insights team want to do, or connecting between studies, meta-analysis, and those things they can do more. So again, this is not like I've purposefully put it as a long-term thing. Once you have established the standards, once you have, experimented with many suppliers, this is something you can build. So at Course 5, we have a product called Research Studio, which, with one of the divisions of Colgate, we have even started executing. It's an MVP stage. So which actually does that, which is this menu-driven simple DIY platform, which I'm saying, which with multiple suppliers. But there could be other measures like this, which you can, kind of educate and empower your stakeholders to do. And as Christian mentioned, it is not easy, because changing a habit or a mindset is not easy. You will not get that in a short run. So there has to be continuous process of communication, telling them the value, showing them the value, and really, helping them get that insights, that process is continuous. So if that is continuous and you have a strong support system, changing the mindset and driving the culture is definitely possible, right? Lastly, do not depend too much on just one type of quantitative study or one type of qualitative study to get those, insights, or to help take those decisions, especially for the innovations, right? So make use of this new age data, like a search data, social media data, even big data, and have systems which, either through resources again, or again through tools in your things, which will kind of empower you to just validate a fact. If you did a qualitative study or one quantitative study with a supplier, and you want to again validate certain facts and run again another qualitative or quantitative study before that, make use of these, data sources, if that can itself give you the answer. uh, for example, in Colgate, in once when we started analyzing the concept test for charcoal based toothpaste, charcoal being a very new ingredient in US, it was very polarizing. People said, oh, what is this? How can I even put that dirty ingredient in my mouth? But when we kind of validated that fact through our social media, it was a very small portion of comment, but the way it was rising, more and more people were getting, knowing about the benefits of the charcoal. It was more popular, it has been more popular in the Asian and Indian kind of context, and people know the antioxidant, antibacterial, and purifying abilities of charcoal. But it took a while for the Western countries to get to there. But through the social media search data and all that, those data sets even help that, okay, even if the concept has a smaller appeal, it has a chance of winning in the long run. And then you can take that practical decision of whether to go ahead or not, and then if required, then rerun another study to kind of come to a conclusion, okay, which of these charcoal concepts can I go ahead with, right? So all in all, what I'm saying is, make use of, don't just get restricted with a qualitative study or quantitative study. They are both very important. They are the major tools which companies use. Continue doing that, but at the same time, make use of these powerful sources such as social data, search data, big data, and so on, and have a system who can analyze and get there. So moving on, so that was all. But I would invite Christian, you once again, to give the final thoughts, and then we can definitely take the question and answer from the audience.
Again, yay!
No worries, no worries. It's live.
So thanks, Silky. So I don't want to spend too much time on repeating what we already said, but I just want to reiterate two things before we then also react to what we've been asked in the chat, and because I already saw a couple of interesting topics popping up. So the first thing is really focus on the fundamentals. Like I said, focus on the support function structure before you scale up, because the worst thing that you can do is you roll something out that is really well accepted by your stakeholders, and then you run into a bottleneck at some point. That's something you have to avoid. And the other thing is, stay open and be ready to change again, because any established thinking of what you think is great now might no longer be great in a couple of months' time. So therefore, like you embrace agile innovation, do the same also for the process. So we really prepare to change processes more dynamically in the future as well. And I don't know if Joseph or Silke, if you want to add anything. Otherwise, I think we can jump right into the questions that I've seen in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you both.
Sure. Just to conclude, I mean, this was the road of agility. You need to have a very strong support system, build those standards and best practices on focusing and standardization, and that will in turn, if you do that continuously along with the support system, the communication and continuous ways of learning, you will definitely achieve an agile culture in your organization. So that should be your ultimate goal, but you need to make the right start and the right way.
Cool.
Sorry, Joseph.
Thank you both. We certainly shared a good set of practical examples, ran through the challenges and your lessons gained through all of this. I'm actually looking forward to coming back in a year's time and running through, the developments over that year and all the pace of change that we've seen. But ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of the main feature of today. Now we can perhaps move on to the Q&A. I'm looking at the clock. I'm sure we can squeeze a couple of questions for you today. So I'm just going to read one out from the list, and there's a long list here, so I'm sure we'll get a few in, but as I said, the rest will be passed on after the event. So next question is, what should be the skill sets of the internal champ, in brackets, senior, junior, specializations? So who could drive agile research on a V team? What has worked? So what have you seen work for that internal champ in terms of a mix of skills? Either of you can take it.
Yeah, and I mean the clear answer there is it depends, because I think when we discussed that internally at the start of the program, I think it was even Silky mentioning, don't get hung up in kind of seniority or whatever. So select the right person. That's also what we did. So you have to find someone who's really dedicated and not from the start kind of, okay, yeah, I don't really want to do it, I don't really believe in it. Find the person that is most open for kind of new ways, and in particular agile. And we had a couple, and then we just selected one, and it worked out perfectly, because you need someone who then wants to drive it from day one and also wants to get hands dirty. What I think the only thing that usually doesn't work is to drive it top down. If you just say, okay, take the most senior person, and then that person tells their whole team, now you have to do it. That's working, but it's then the usual not invented here mentality and so on, and I just have to do it. So find the right person in a specific team, like I said earlier, maybe a team that is not super visible, that you can really experiment first, but that also has the mindset already to do these things.
Wonderful, thank you. Next one is from Irina, and just reading the question, I can see she's a practitioner. So this is the question: with this approach, how do you avoid answering very small, tactical, and sometimes not even important questions instead of thinking the things through? Question mark. As since it is so easy and cheap to use agile approach, it might be difficult to defend the common sense sometimes.
Yeah, it's a great question, and also great to see a former partner in crime that I've worked with quite long, very close to where I live now, by the way.
Okay.
But it's been a while. So yes, that's always the risk, because I think my key statement wherever I had my career in market research is, I think nowadays with all the agile and fast and also sometimes cheap tools, we are over researched. So basically we are not using common sense anymore in thinking. So because it's so easy, is that red or that red better on a Colgate pack? Oh, I don't know. So let's ask a couple of consumers, and then you get 55, 45, okay, we go for the 55, although it might not fit your strategy and so on. So therefore, yes, that is a risk. On the other side, to be fair, I also don't care, because it's very little budget involved, and it's also no longer time for me or my team, because then if they use it on a DIY platform, it's their time. And what we also achieved is it's also very often their budget that we agreed with, usually then the category leads, okay, that amount of research budget you can spend however you want, but once you run out of that, then that's it. And then we take over and decide what is the right question. Because I really hated the time, and still happening from time to time, when we as insights people are seen as the question police. What should we ask, and what should other partners decide on their own? So that's basically gone. So it's basically something, a task that I always hated off my list. So really the question, yes, that's a risk, but it's no longer my problem. Yes, at some point my VP marketing will tell me, okay, why are we asking all these questions? And say, yeah, but that's because your team basically wanted to ask that question. And to be fair, also over time, we see that this is basically what happens in the first couple of months or weeks. they're asking every question. Also, when tools like Whitebar came up and so on, everyone in the UK just asked question because they got it within minutes. After a certain period, they also see, okay, can I really defend now that I decided for this because 55% of people said yes and 45 said no? Or do I better not get that data point and make the decision on my own?
Thank you, Christian. Thank you for your extended answers. They're really, really helpful. Guys, I've got another 5 or 6 questions that I'd love to ask, but we've run out of time. So for all the folks that have put in their questions, thank you so much for your patience and for your interest today. As we said, we will pick up all the questions, answer them all by Christian and by Silky, and then we will share the transcript of the questions and answers after the webinar is recorded and shared with everyone. If you've got any more questions after the event, you can also send those in. But right now, I can see quite a lot. So, as I said, we'll put them in the follow-up communications. So for now, thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you both, Christian and Silky, and for the team behind the scenes who've organized all this and we're working meticulously on it for a few weeks. On behalf of the team today, thank you for watching and bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all.